Welcome to Crisis in Perception, where we examine the systems shaping our world one book at a time.
Today we're doing a really critical deep dive. Our source material is Dan Ariely's book, Misbelief: What Makes Rational People Believe Irrational Things.
And our mission today is, well, it's pretty intense. We're going to try and map out that systematic journey that pushes, intelligent, rational people to believe things that are demonstrably false.
Exactly, these complex, all-encompassing narratives that Ariely calls misbelief.
And what's so important here, and what Ariely really argues, is that misinformation, conspiracy thinking, it's not just a failure of a few individuals.
No, not at all. It's a systemic outcome. It's rooted in these really predictable psychological, cognitive, and social forces.
Which means, and this is the scary part, it could affect any of us.
Under the right conditions, absolutely.
So we're trying to move past that, that knee-jerk reaction of, how can those people be so stupid? And instead ask a better question.
Right. What system, what set of pressures is producing this outcome?
Exactly. It's a systems-level analysis.
Yeah.
We're coming at this with empathy and curiosity, not with judgment. We want to understand the mechanics of it.
So to do that, let's start with the person who drew this map for us, Dan Ariely. I mean, this guy is a giant in behavioral science.
Yeah, he's the James B. Duke Professor of Psychology and Behavioral Economics at Duke. He's been studying human irrationality for decades.
He's the author of Predictably Irrational, right? The book that kind of explains all the silly, predictable ways we make bad decisions with money or, our time.
That's the one. So he's an expert on the design flaws of the human mind. But this book, Misbelief, it didn't come from a neat lab experiment.
No, it came from something deeply personal and frankly, very disturbing. He became a target of the very thing he studies, right in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Wow. To go from the observer to the subject like that must have been just, completely disorienting.
It was. He talks about getting this cryptic email from an old colleague, just asking why he'd become so greedy and evil.
And it had links.
It had links. And when he clicked them, he found himself in this parallel universe where he was the main villain.
The villain of what, exactly?
Of the entire COVID-19 fraud. Websites were calling him the chief consciousness engineer.
Chief consciousness engineer? What does that even mean?
I know, it sounds like something from a sci-fi movie. But they were tying him to Agenda 21, saying he was designing plans with his Illuminati friends and Bill Gates.
To do what?
To reduce the world's population. They were saying he was designing infertility vaccines and a global citizen tracking system.
That is terrifying. And they were comparing him to Goebbels, sending death threats.
Daily death threats. And the thing is, his actual connection to the Gates Foundation was this tiny, brief project years earlier.
What was it?
It was on hunger and early childhood nutrition in Africa. Had absolutely nothing to do with vaccines or tracking, but that little thread of truth was all they needed.
They just pulled on it until they unraveled this whole fantasy.
And the evidence they used, it's a masterclass in manipulation.
Let's talk about that, the video clips. The first one was that satirical speech, right?
Yeah, back in 2017, he's at a medical conference, and he gives this very provocative, Jonathan Swift-style speech, a modest proposal.
Okay.
He suggests satirically that to cut medical costs, we should encourage smoking, increase stress, and slow down ambulances.
He was obviously making a point about how broken the system is, right? That we focus on expensive cures instead of cheap prevention.
Precisely. But the clips that went viral were totally stripped of that context, sometimes just the one sentence.
And they added things to it.
Oh, yeah. They spliced in images of Nazi concentration camps and added this, ominous laugh track.
Wow. So they just manufactured proof that he had these evil intentions.
They turned a behavioral economist into a monster with a few simple edits. The other example is just as bad.
The one with the Gates Foundation.
They took a TV clip where he mentions his work on hunger with Gates. Then they took a totally separate clip where he mentioned vaccines in a general sense.
Then he just mashed them together.
Yeah. Spliced them into one sentence. It created a false confession, making it sound like he was admitting to working with Gates on these nefarious vaccines.
So you've got context removal and then just straight up splicing reality. And that's enough to fuel death threats.
And that's what led him to the book's central thesis. He realized this wasn't just a few crazy people.
It's a predictable outcome of a system.
Exactly. So let's state that thesis really clearly. The argument is that misbelief isn't some glitch in our brains.
It's a process.
It's a gradual, systematic process. He calls it a funnel that pulls people in deeper and deeper. And it's a predictable response to three specific things:
Okay, what are they?
deep uncertainty, a loss of personal control, and this is the big one, a massive erosion of trust in our institutions.
Okay, the funnel. Let's unpack that. So he's saying that healthy skepticism, which we need, right?
Right, it's essential.
That slides into this dysfunctional doubt, a kind of reflexive mistrust of anything that's considered mainstream.
Yeah, an almost automatic rejection. And this funnel, he says, is made up of four elements that are all swirling together.
Emotional, cognitive, personality, and social.
Right, and they're not stages you go through in order. They're more like, forces that are all interacting and adding momentum, pulling you down.
And one of the most fascinating points he makes is that this isn't a left-wing or a right-wing problem.
No, it's a human problem. It's so easy for us to point fingers, but the data just doesn't support that.
There was research by Adam Enders.
That's right. He showed that different misbeliefs are spread pretty evenly across the political spectrum. The content might change.
So a liberal might be more prone to believe one conspiracy and a conservative another.
Exactly, but the underlying psychological mechanisms are identical. The extreme wings of both parties are highly susceptible.
Which explains those really strange alliances you sometimes see. Like ultra-progressive anti-vaxxers teaming up with far-right government mistrust groups.
They don't agree on policy, but they are united by this deep foundational mistrust of the elites, or whatever you want to call them. The doubt is the glue.
So if the driver is this systemic doubt, that brings up the question of who's spreading this stuff. We tend to imagine, Russian bots or political operatives.
And they're out there, for sure. But Ariely says the most common and effective spreader is what he calls the naive person.
So just a regular person with no agenda.
No agenda other than trying to make sense of a really confusing and scary world.
So they go searching for answers, they fall into the funnel, and suddenly everything clicks into place for them.
And they genuinely believe they've discovered some hidden truth. That they've woken up while everyone else is still a sheep.
And that must come with a pretty powerful feeling of moral duty.
A huge moral imperative. They share this stuff not because they're malicious, but because they feel compelled to warn everyone, to wake people up.
Which makes them the perfect missionaries for misbelief. Far more trusted by their friends and family than some anonymous bot.
And that means you can't just fight this by shouting facts at people. You have to address that underlying need for certainty and control.
Okay, so let's start there with the emotional elements. Ariely's point is that emotion comes first, right? We feel something awful, and then we build a story to explain it.
Exactly. The feeling precedes the belief. And the spark that lights the whole thing on fire is unpredictable stress.
And it's important to make a distinction here, isn't it? It's not just any stress.
No, it's not the stress of a deadline or planning a big event. That's predictable. This is the sudden, shocking kind.
Like losing your job out of the blue.
Or getting a terrible diagnosis, or, a global pandemic that turns the whole world upside down overnight. It's that feeling of being completely out of control.
And that feeling, that shock, it has a direct impact on our ability to think clearly.
It does. It triggers what's called the scarcity mindset. Ariely said he felt this himself when he was dealing with all that online hate. His own cognitive bandwidth just shrank.
And there's hard science on this, right? It's not just a feeling.
Oh yeah, it's very robust. They've done studies on sugarcane farmers in India. They tested their cognitive function before the harvest when they were under incredible financial stress.
And then after the harvest, when they were secure.
And the difference was huge. Their performance on IQ tests, specifically things measuring fluid intelligence and executive control, dropped significantly under scarcity.
So they weren't less intelligent. Their brains were just full.
Their brains were full of worry. And that consumes the processing power you need for complex, critical thought. You just don't have the mental energy for nuance.
And this is where it really gets systemic. Because the stress doesn't even have to be related to the misbelief itself.
No, it's cumulative. The source doesn't matter. There was this incredible study that found people living in regions with high levels of violent conflict.
So a totally separate source of intense, unpredictable stress.
Right. And those people were statistically more likely to believe COVID-19 conspiracy theories.
Wait, really? So the anxiety I feel about my job could actually make me more susceptible to a conspiracy about, I don't know, 5G towers,
Yeah,
even though they're not connected.
that's the point exactly. The stress just piles up, and the brain is desperate for any simple story that can explain the general feeling of chaos. It's looking for coherence.
Which leads to what he calls misattribution of emotions. We feel awful, and we need to stick that feeling onto something specific.
We are terrible at knowing why we feel the way we feel. You know that famous study with the shaky bridge?
The one where men on a scary bridge thought they were aroused by the experimenter, not just scared of falling.
That's the one. The brain just grabs the most obvious explanation for a strong feeling. So in the funnel, the anxiety from the pandemic or your finances gets misattributed.
So it's not the virus, it's the masks. It's not the economy, it's this secret cabal. You find a target.
A simple target. And Ariely suggests one possible intervention here is to try and help people reattribute their stress early on.
To connect the feeling back to real, manageable life events.
Right. If you can frame it as, I feel awful because of this job search, that's a problem you can work on. It gives back a little agency.
But if you can't do that,
Yeah.
that's when the villain seeking starts.
The desperation for order leads you to find a bad guy. And this is driven by a powerful cognitive bias.
The proportionality bias.
Yes, the idea that a huge problem like a global pandemic must have a huge intentional cause.
It can't just be bad luck or a random virus-jumping species. That's too unsatisfying.
It's psychologically unbearable for many people. It's much more comforting to believe a powerful evil group is in control than to believe that no one is in control.
Finding a villain gives you a story. It gives you an explanation.
And it gives you this short-term hit of psychological relief. You feel like you know something secret, you're in control just for a moment.
But it's a trap, isn't it?
It's a vicious cycle.
Yeah.
Because dwelling on those dark, scary stories ultimately just makes you feel worse. Your well-being plummets.
And then you go back to the source, the forums, the videos, for another little hit of that certainty.
It becomes an addiction, and each cycle pulls you deeper down the funnel.
So if the emotions are the fuel, the cognitive elements are how we process everything. It's the how of the search.
Right, and we're all wired with these mental shortcuts, these heuristics to get through the day. The problem is that social media is like.
He calls it highly processed fast food for the mind.
It's a great analogy because it's engineered to exploit those shortcuts. The algorithm doesn't care about truth, it cares about keeping your attention.
And what keeps our attention are these simple, emotionally charged stories that confirm what we already think.
And the speed of it all just overwhelms our ability to think critically. We can't possibly research every single claim we see.
No, you have to rely on trust, on social proof. But what happens when you start trusting the wrong sources?
Then the whole system breaks down. And the first big cognitive problem is confirmation bias.
This is a classic one. We actively look for information that confirms what we already believe.
And just as importantly, we ignore, dismiss, or find reasons to discredit anything that contradicts it. We're not scientists looking for truth. We're lawyers building a case for a conclusion we've already reached.
We're soldiers defending a belief, not scouts trying to map the territory.
That's a great way to put it. And motivated reasoning is the weapon that soldier uses. We use our intelligence not to find the truth, but to construct these elaborate justifications for what we want to be true.
And a really specific version of that is solution aversion. This is where it gets really, really political.
It is. This bias shows that sometimes our resistance isn't about the facts of a problem, it's about our hatred for the proposed solution.
Can you give an example?
Sure, studies on climate change have shown this clearly. When you show conservatives data about climate change and pair it with solutions they hate, like big government regulations.
They're more likely to just deny the problem exists at all.
Exactly. But if you show them the exact same data and pair it with solutions they find more acceptable, like market-based innovation.
They're suddenly more willing to accept the facts.
The facts didn't change, only the ideological palatability of the solution.
So, applied to the pandemic, if I fundamentally hate the idea of lockdowns or vaccine mandates,
It's cognitively easier for you to just deny the severity of the virus itself. You attack the problem to avoid the solution. You can't debunk that with facts alone.
Okay, and the last cognitive piece is this failure of metacognition, thinking about our own thinking.
Yeah, this is where overconfidence becomes a huge driver. It starts with something called the illusion of explanatory depth.
I love this one. It's the idea that we think we know how things work, like a zipper or a toilet.
But when you ask someone to explain it step by step, they realize they have no idea. We all systematically overestimate how much we know.
And when you combine that with someone who actually knows very little about a topic, You get the Dunning-Kruger effect.
The classic. The people who are the least knowledgeable are often the most confident in their own expertise.
They don't know enough to even realize how much they don't know.
And that overconfidence is so dangerous, it makes them highly resistant to expert consensus, incredibly susceptible to fake news that promises secret knowledge.
And way more likely to spread it because they genuinely believe they're educating people.
The overconfidence turns them into missionaries. The only antidote, really, is a dose of humility, shifting from that soldier mindset to the scout mindset,
Being willing to be wrong.
which is often the first thing you lose when you go down that funnel.
Okay, so as we get deeper, the personal and social elements really start to take over and lock people in.
Yeah, this is where it gets really sticky. On the personality side, you have traits like patternicity.
The tendency to see patterns in random noise,
Mhm.
seeing faces in the clouds.
We're seeing causal links in stock market data or a string of coin flips. We're all
Yep.
wired for it, but some people have it in overdrive. And crucially, feeling a lack of control supercharges it.
How so?
When people feel out of control, their brains work harder to invent patterns to try and restore a sense of order.
So the chaos of the world actually makes the idea of a complex, all-powerful conspiracy more attractive.
It makes it more compelling. Because a conspiracy is a pattern. It's a story that connects all the random, scary dots into one coherent narrative. A villain in control is better than no one in control.
Wow. And once that internal need is there, the social forces kick in, the push and the pull.
The push is ostracism. When someone starts sharing these new beliefs with their old friends, their family.
They get laughed at, dismissed.
Right, and that social rejection is incredibly painful. It literally hurts. So that pushes them away from their old social circles.
And at the same time, there's a pull from this new community that's waiting for them online.
A community that offers instant validation. They don't laugh. They say, "Welcome, we're so glad you finally woke up."
They offer belonging, social proof,
Right.
a new identity. For someone feeling isolated, that must be incredibly powerful.
It's a lifeline. But once you're inside that group, cognitive dissonance kicks in and makes it almost impossible to leave.
Explain that. That's the need to keep our actions and our beliefs consistent, right?
Exactly. And people in these groups have made huge investments. They've argued with friends, maybe cut off family, spent money, posted things publicly,
They've burned their bridges.
then burned their bridges.
Mhm.
And so our actions start to drive our beliefs, not the other way around. He brings up that classic study of the doomsday cult from the 1950s.
When the prophecy failed and the world didn't end,
The people who hadn't invested much just left. But the true believers, the ones who had sold their homes and quit their jobs,
they didn't leave, they doubled down.
they became even more fanatical. They had to. The only way to resolve that huge dissonance between their actions and reality was to believe even harder, to try and convince others they were right all along.
To justify the sacrifice.
So if you've alienated your family for a belief, you can't just admit you were wrong. You have to become even more extreme to justify the cost.
Which leads to these shibboleths. That's a wild concept.
It's like a secret password for the group. It's an extreme, often absurd, and easily debunked claim.
The example he uses is that claim about schools putting litter boxes in bathrooms for kids who identify as cats.
Which is completely false and easily disproven. But that's the point.
So by repeating something you know is false to the outside world.
You are signaling your total loyalty to the in-group. You're showing that your allegiance to the tribe is more important than objective reality.
That's chilling. It turns facts into a currency of identity.
And at that point, you're locked in. The fear of being kicked out of this new tribe, of being alone again, is more powerful than any fact check could ever be.
So all of this, the emotions, the biases, the social pressure, it all converges on one massive societal problem,
The erosion of trust.
which Ariely calls the lubricant of society.
It is. Money, laws, insurance, public health. None of it works without a baseline of shared trust. And misbelief is like pouring sand into that engine.
And losing trust in one place, say, the media, makes it easier to lose trust everywhere else.
It's a domino effect. If the media is lying, then the scientists are probably lying and the government is definitely lying. It all gets connected into one grand conspiracy.
The example he uses to show this is the VAER's database.
The Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System. It's an open source system designed for transparency, right?
Right.
To collect any and all reports of possible vaccine side effects so scientists can look for signals.
It's a safety feature.
It's a safety feature. But because the foundational trust is already gone, misbelievers see VAERs as a smoking gun.
as a covert admission of harm.
They take the raw, unverified data and treat it as proof of a massive cover-up. A system designed to build trust becomes fuel for the conspiracy because the default assumption is malice.
So this isn't just about individuals believing weird things. It's about our collective inability to agree on reality.
And if we can't agree on reality, we can't solve any big problems together. Not a pandemic, not a financial crisis, nothing. It's a threat to our ability to function as a society.
So when you put this whole map together, what's the big takeaway? How does this change how we should approach this crisis?
Well, first, it totally reframes rationality. It shows that we're driven by our emotional needs for control, for belonging, way more than by a simple lack of facts.
Which is why just debunking or fact-checking often doesn't work.
It can even backfire. You're attacking the belief, but you're not addressing the underlying fear or the social need that belief is fulfilling. You kill one villain, they just find another.
So the real takeaway has to be about system design.
Yes. We have to admit that modern life is just too complex for our brains to handle unaided. We are cognitively outmatched by the world we have built.
We can't just expect everyone to become a super rational fact-checking machine, especially when they're under stress.
No, that's an unfair ask. Instead, Ariely says we have to build better systems. We need to design our information environments to counteract our known bugs.
He uses the analogy of cars, which I think is brilliant.
It is. We know humans are terrible, distractible drivers, so we don't just tell them to drive better.
We build safety features into the car. Seatbelts, airbags, blind spot monitors, speedometers.
We design the system to protect us from our own predictable failures. And Airy argues we need to invent the cognitive equivalent of those things for our minds.
What would a cognitive seatbelt look like?
Maybe it's a bit of built-in friction. A mandatory 30-second pause before you can share an emotionally charged article. Just enough time for your rational brain, your scout mindset, to catch up.
Or a kind of reliability score for sources that's more prominent than a like button.
It's about designing a less stressful, less polarized, more supportive information environment. We have to start blaming the people who fall into the funnel and start redesigning the funnel itself.
The system of misbelief is so complex. It pulls on our emotional needs, our cognitive shortcuts, our personalities, our deep-seated need to belong. So with all these forces pushing us towards simple emotional answers, we want to leave you with a question.
What is one concrete small action, the equivalent of buckling your seatbelt, that you could integrate into your daily life to slow that pull?
What tiny piece of friction or what small pause could you introduce for yourself today to give your scout mindset a fighting chance? That's something for you to mull over.
This deep dive was based on Dan Ariely's book, Misbelief. What makes rational people believe irrational things? We highly encourage you to read the book or borrow it from a local library.
This project is free and publicly accessible. If you'd like to support the time, tools, and research behind crisis and perception, you can become a supporter on Patreon.
For a shorter visual overview of this topic, see the mini explainer linked in the description.
If you enjoy this kind of systems-level analysis, please like, subscribe, and comment with books or topics you'd like us to explore next.